Hi, my name is Jessie Jones, and I'm the volunteer coordinator with Coastwatch. Thank you for clicking onto our Wednesday night webinar for May 20th, 2020. We talked with Megan Ponder, producer of The Story of Plastic, and also co-founder of Peak Plastic Foundation. This video was a part of our May series of marine debris webinars for education and outreach for our Coastwatch volunteers and the general public. Coastwatch is a mile-by-mile adoption program on the Oregon coast, where we ask our volunteers to walk their coast mile at least 4 times a year and provide us with some simple data, and we provide those data sheets. And then for those volunteers that want to get a little bit deeper involved in citizen science, we connect our volunteers with scientists and researchers all up and down the West Coast to survey dead birds, marine debris, marine mammals, sea stars, hybrid beach grasses, and so much more. Coastwatch is a program of Oregon Shores Conservation Coalition. And Oregon Shores does a lot of work and has been doing for decades protecting our Oregon coast. Please check out oregonshores.org for more information and to become a member. Thank you very much again for being here tonight. And my information and Megan's information will be available at the end of this presentation. Thanks again and enjoy the webinar.
One thing that's become really clear is in order to effectively address plastic pollution, efforts must extend beyond managing this material at end of life. We can't recycle our way out of this problem. In fact, we can't just look at this problem from a waste management perspective. Issues of plastic pollution include a massive increase in single-use plastic production, aggressive product expansion into emerging markets with limited infrastructure, and a reliance on foreign markets and exports for recycling. In order to better understand the problem, the goal of this project was to show the entire life cycle of plastic and to include broad stakeholder perspectives in our efforts. There are people and programs all over the world working on this problem from different perspectives, engaging at different points along the plastic's life cycle, and we share common interests. Most of you have heard and read about plastic pollution impacts. I want to share some specific individual stories from the people I've met about how plastic pollution is impacting their lives, their work, and their communities. So this is Priggy and his wife Daru from Surabaya, Indonesia. Priggy is a biologist who started working on plastic issues in an effort to protect Indonesia's rivers. He invited us to see the problems he's working on, including impacts from scrap imports or recycling imports. And we stayed with him twice over 2 summers. This is some of what we saw. The piles that you're about to see here are plastic contamination from imported paper bales. So I'm going to show a video, and Jessie, you just let me know if we're having any technical difficulties, but hopefully this works. These are
from US, Texas. Yeah, it's from Australia. I'm from Toronto. This Nestle from UK. Yeah, this one from Oregon. From New Zealand. Dunkin' Donut. Red Dog is Unilever. Tivana. Awalnya kita memang merasa plastik ini sesuatu yang bagus ya. Jadi ini praktis begitu. Tapi kemudian terakhir kita bisa melihat bagaimana plastik itu berubah menjadi sebuah bencana bagi kita.
Dirapikan semuanya udah di
supaya seharusnya dibakar.
Kertas itu terbawa, kemudian ada material seperti plastik, seperti saset, seperti kaleng minuman yang terikut melalui sampah ini. Sampah-sampah ini kemudian dipilah, dipisahkan menjadi kaleng, kemudian plastik yang bernilai. Sisa waste ini kemudian akan dibakar. Saat Cina sudah menghentikan impor plastik dan Indonesia menjadi berpeluang untuk lebih banyak lagi menerima sampah impor plastik gitu ya. Karena kita tidak ingin kemudian air yang kita jaga ini kemudian dikotori oleh sampah impor plastik gitu. Kita tidak ingin kemudian udara kita itu dipenuhi dengan asap-asap hasil pembakaran sampah impor plastik gitu. Dan lingkungan adalah masuk dalam hak asasi manusia.
This is Tiza from Jakarta. Tiza leads the plastic bag diet movement and led the development of Indonesia's national plastic bag policy. We visited Tiza twice in 2017 and 2018, and floated the Ciliwung River in Jakarta with her.
I feel like I don't know how to answer anymore when people say, why are you focusing on plastic? Why is plastic a problem? I mean, I feel like I should just take them here and not say anything, just take them here for an hour and then see what they think, whether they think plastic bags are not a problem anymore. I can still remember a time when I was still a teenager and this wasn't a problem. So we're not talking about decades. We're talking about maybe 10 to 15 years of this kind of lifestyle. Most of it probably you can't undo because the stratification of plastic bag layers has reached 4 or 5 meters deep into the soil. A lot of the single-use plastics that end up polluting our planet, we only use them once and they stay forever. They're made of a material that lasts forever. They're not something that we need as an essential part of our lives. And yet here we are, stuck with it. I think what's most frustrating is that the industries are out there pushing the idea that this is all because of bad management. You know, that the waste is here because the government isn't putting enough funding into proper waste management. But they're distracting from the truth, which is that there's no way you can manage this waste. It's not meant to be managed.
This is Martin from Berkeley. Martin runs the Ecology Center, which has operated Berkeley's curbside recycling program since 1973. Martin has led several waste reduction initiatives, including Berkeley's recent disposable-free dining ordinance, and has been on the forefront of this issue for years.
Well, we got into recycling because we thought it was the right thing to do. Of course, it is a disposal service. You know, at its core, it's taking stuff that people don't want anymore and trying to do something better than landfill with it. You can see the range of things that are coming out of people's houses. 10, 15 years ago, this would have had a lot more aluminum, a lot more glass. It's amazing how many things have moved to plastic. In 2013, under significant pressure from our city council, we began accepting non-bottle mixed rigid plastic. So all the plastic containers, berry containers, keg cups, plastic cold cups, you know, from Starbucks. Procter & Gamble wants us all to believe that all their packaged goods are in, you know, totally environmentally sound packaging. They want us all using single-use packaged products so that we're just, you know, on the supply chain. It's totally unfair to the cities and the recyclers on the back end, because then everyone says, oh, it's recyclable, you should collect it. Well, then what? We have to pay to sort it, we have to pay to process it, and then we don't have any markets for it? Once we said we would accept it and we would start sorting it and packing it for export, it was just like the floodgates were open. I mean, the tons went up and up and up and up and up. Because China was buying it. There actually was a market for that stuff. And even if we couldn't afford to sort it out here, we could bail it up and ship it in a shipping container over there, and somebody over there would sort it out.
This is Priscilla, a South Texas organizer who works with communities impacted by the oil and gas industry. We met Priscilla in Karnes County, Texas, a major oil and gas producing county that has been rapidly transformed by fracking.
I think people don't necessarily think about what plastics is made of or where plastics come from, other than on the shelf of like a grocery store or some sort of a market where we buy our products. But again, like the reality is that the compounds, the chemicals that are needed to create plastics come from the shale formations. It comes from these oil and gas pockets in the rock. You can't talk about one without the other. Plastics doesn't just cause pollution in the ocean or on the ground. It's also causing pollution where it's coming from, at the point of extraction.
This is our dream home. We thought we were coming into a great area to where we could live out our years, and then this stuff started turning up. You're not showing my face, are you?
No.
Okay. The pollution has gotten way out of hand. Everybody has to drink bottled water. There's a water well on my place, and we don't drink the water because we know damn well we can't use that water. We don't know what's coming out of that flare, and they won't tell us. You know, I think that these oil companies they think they're above the law.
Karnes County is the topmost oil producing county in the state. I work with community members that are living 500 feet from a facility that's the size of a football field. Their lives were dramatically changed over a period of 5 or 6 years. In these oil and gas pockets, you also have chemicals like benzene and toluene and ethylbenzene and xylene that are all extremely harmful for your health. Now some of the residents depend on medication to get through the day because their headaches are so bad, or they have chronic respiratory issues and so they can't breathe. With oil and gas extraction, that oil, the gas, and the natural gas liquids go to the next processing phase, which is a refinery or cracking facilities, and those are all located along the Gulf Coast of Texas.
And finally, this is Vaughn from Manila. Vaughn is the global coordinator of the Break Free from Plastic movement. Our team visited Manila several times and saw a wide range of impacts, including impacts to the fishing community of Manila Bay.
Plastic pollution is really a life and death issue for most people, at least in this part of the world. Manila Bay is like a cove, and there's several provinces located along that coastline. So whatever the currents bring in from outside, they stay within that cove. And whatever waste is deposited to the bay from the rivers also stays there. Every day, day in, day out, there's cleaning operations going on. It's unending. You can do cleanups and the problem will not go away. We have to look at the root causes. We can't be doing cleanups all our lives. This is not a solution. We're an archipelagic country and we depend on fish and seafood for sustenance. It is pretty much part of the Filipino lifestyle and culture. Anong klaseng plastic, mga ganitong klase?
Yung plastic na mga ganyan, hindi tatama sa ano yan, kasi litang yan sa lambat eh.
Oo. And then yung, sabihin nyo nga ulit, ilang porsyento ng kukuha nyo sa regular na pangingisda nyo, plastic?
Siguro ang ano, halos sa ngayon eh, 60-40.
60 fish, pero may 40, and then 40% plastic. Mm. The stuff we read about saying there'll be more plastics in the oceans and fish in 2050, that's actually a reality for most of these fishermen. And a lot of this is really unrecyclable plastic. A great percentage are really multi-layer packaging. The sachets that you find, like this one, you cannot recycle this. Nobody bothers to collect them, that's why they end up here.
So what do all these stories, all these communities around the world have in common? There are impacted communities all over the world, and they are all saying the same thing. They are being overwhelmed by the impacts of single-use plastics. This is a systemic problem, and yet we are currently producing more single-use plastic products than ever before, and the oil and gas industry is heavily investing in new production facilities to accelerate this growth. More than half of all plastic ever manufactured has been made in just the last 2 decades, and production of single-use plastic is skyrocketing. Plastic packaging makes up the largest component of all plastic produced, and packaging trends are moving toward more single-use packaging that is increasingly non-recyclable. 2 main drivers of this growth right now are cheap shale gas in the United States, fracking, and new growth markets for single-use plastics, in particular, bringing these products to Asia and Africa. As we saw in the video clip with Priscilla, the fracking boom is an ethylene boom. Cheap shale gas is driving major investments in plastic production facilities, with more than $200 billion currently planned in new infrastructure, especially along the US Gulf Coast and Ohio River Valley. We visited the Texas Gulf Coast, pictured here. This area is roughly the same distance as Cannon Beach to Gold Beach. Can you imagine if this many new plastic plants were being built here? We met with communities all along the Gulf Coast experiencing impacts from increased refining activity. In the Houston metropolitan area, home of the 2nd largest petrochemical complex in the world, facilities are located alongside parks, schools, and homes. Residents are experiencing chronic and acute symptoms of toxic exposure, including headaches, nausea, upper respiratory issues, and increased cancer risk. In Port Lavaca, Texas, we met with local shrimpers and residents who have filed suit against a company called Formosa Plastics for spilling billions of plastic pellets per year, contaminating area soils, waterways, oysters, fish, and other wildlife. As petrochemical companies build massive new production facilities, communities in the US are experiencing devastating impacts from increased plastic production, with much of the plastic produced exported to Asia and other consumer markets, bringing significant pollution impacts to communities there. Single-use plastic packaging is rapidly being introduced to places with programs or infrastructure necessary to manage it. Communities are struggling to manage waste as their waste stream shifts from mostly organics and high-value recyclables to increasing amounts of low-value, non-recyclable. Over and over again, we heard how single-use plastic packaging is replacing traditional methods and overwhelming the capacity to manage it. In India, we met with Pratibha and toured open-air markets where traditional practices are quickly being replaced by single-use plastics and new consumption patterns. Pratibha remembers bringing her own containers to buy cooking oil or spices as a child, and now markets are flooded with single-serving, multi-layer sachets. Sachets are small, single-serving packets that sell everything from one-time use shampoo or soap. In almost every community visited, flexible, multi-layer packaging was called out as a problematic material. So, while global waste management systems vary widely, many communities around the world rely on informal sector recycling, where waste pickers pull out valuable materials from the waste stream for recycling. High-value plastics are often collected and sold. Low-value plastics, including flexible packaging, single-serving plastic sachets, plastic bags, styrofoam, are either landfilled or incinerated, or in many communities, dumped or open burned. Often these uncollected plastics simply collect as litter and are washed into rivers and waterways in the rainy season. But plastic is not just a problem for Asia or places that rely on the informal sector for end-of-life collection. Places with well-developed collection and recycling programs, like the United States or Europe, have also struggled to manage the changing waste stream. As Martin explained in the video, and as all of us in Oregon know firsthand, as more and more products have moved to plastic, recycling programs have expanded to include more plastics. As sorting became more difficult and more expensive, West Coast recycling programs relied heavily on exporting mixed plastics to China. When I first met Martin a couple of years ago, he was putting GPS trackers in his bales to see where they ended up. For years, he knew that plastic scrap from Berkeley was going to a vetted recycling facility in China. But after Green Fence and the import restrictions, he no longer knew where exactly the material was going. The vetted facility had decided that of all the plastic they imported, this mixed plastic scrap was the least profitable, the dirtiest, and was becoming more regulated. So they decided not to buy it anymore. So Martin was selling to a broker in Oakland, who was selling to a broker in Hong Kong. And after that, he had no idea where the material was going. He had seen multiple reports and images like this, showing small family-run workshops in China, operating with no environmental or safety controls, and he was concerned. So he decided to track it. He tracked the bale as it arrived at the port and was trucked into the Chinese countryside. He had a colleague in China investigate the site for him, and they discovered an open-air, informal recycling site with rudimentary chipping and water stations that were emptying straight into nearby waterways. So any unwanted or unrecyclable material was just dumped into piles and burned, or dumped into ravines that washed into waterways during monsoon season. Soon after this, in the summer of 2017, China announced strict import restrictions and contamination standards, effectively banning all plastic scrap imports. As many of you remember, Oregon, which relied heavily on exports to China, was hit hard. China's import ban has created a lot of uncertainty around end markets for plastics, particularly for low-grade or mixed plastics. While Southeast Asia saw an increase in plastic scrap imports, particularly Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, these countries simply do not have the infrastructure or capacity to accept the volume of material that China was taking. And many governments are announcing import bans or restrictions as these countries report increased pollution from dumping and illegal activity there. And it's not just plastic bales that are causing problems for importing countries. As we saw in the video with Priggy in Indonesia, plastic contamination from imported paper bales is being dumped in villages and on farmland. These piles of imported plastic contamination are picked through for any high-value materials, like metals or flattened PET or HDPE, but the majority of these piles are burned or washed into nearby rivers. So again, this is plastic material that was collected for recycling here in the United States, Oregon, and was sorted and exported in paper bales and dumped in villages in Surabaya, Indonesia. We can do better than this. This is a complex problem that requires a broad set of solutions, but it is clear we must focus on reduction. We cannot recycle our way out of this problem. Recycling is part of the solution, but it can't handle all the different types or the volume of plastic that is being produced. Even with new technology and new investment, recycling efforts will not keep pace with the global pace of production. Plastic feedstocks are cheap and their costs are externalized. Any efforts to improve plastic recycling and waste management systems must be met with efforts to reduce or eliminate unnecessary plastic use and production. Plastic pollution isn't someone else's fault or someone else's problem. Our local and regional policies and programs have global impacts and affect communities around the world. We have an opportunity to engage these issues and build a path forward we can be proud of. To be successful, we need to reduce overall packaging and find other ways to deliver goods and services. We need to call out problematic materials and hold producers accountable. So for decades, the plastic industry has focused on the individual consumer responsibility narrative. A major goal of the film was to shift the narrative to producer responsibility, to the need for policy action and systemic change. Individual action to tackle plastic pollution will never be enough without a parallel systemic change focused on reducing overall plastic production. And there's opportunity and collective power to drive systemic change. The Break Free from Plastic movement is a global movement of more than 8,000 organizations and supporters from around the world, working together across the entire plastics value chain to reduce single-use plastics and push for lasting solutions. One of the key programs of the Break Free from Plastic movement is the Global Brand Audit. This is where communities around the world conduct cleanups and brand audits to hold corporations accountable. So instead of a traditional waste audit that only characterizes the type of litter found, like plastic bottle or package or et cetera, the brand audit characterizes specific brands and names the top polluting companies in an effort to shift the narrative away from individuals and on to producers to drive coordinated corporate campaigns. Using the data collected from cleanups all over the world, Break Free from Plastic was able to name the companies polluting the most places with the most plastics. Then they called on producers to the top polluters to lead the way in revealing how much plastic they use, set clear public measurable targets on how they reduce the quantity of single-use plastics, and finally to eventually reinvent their delivery systems in order to create more plastic pollution. And just a note, I'm happy to share any information on the brand audit if it's something that you're interested in organizing. There are toolkits online for how to start a brand audit. And lastly, I'll just stop or close by saying that, I've learned a lot in recent years and met so many amazing people while making this film. And I think a major takeaway for me has really been the power of the movement and the power of coalition building and collective effort. There's a real opportunity in including broader stakeholders and broader perspectives in our efforts. It was really clear to us while making this film that while each individual story was impactful, the stories were inherently more powerful when seen in the context of the full life cycle and when you see how each of these stories are connected. Building off our experience making The Story of Plastic, we have launched a organization to do more intersectional storytelling in collective campaigns. It's called the Peak Plastic Foundation. Really, our goal here is to link the efforts of the Global South with the counterparts in the Global North to continue to shift the narrative on plastics. Our first areas of focus include petrochemical expansion and the proliferation of sachets in Asia and Africa. Our current project, we're working with Break Free from Plastic members around the world to define principles for a just COVID-19 recovery and help frame the post-COVID-19 narrative. This gives us an opportunity to create a proactive, united messaging framework and prioritize our messaging. I know a lot of you have probably seen or read about efforts from the plastics industry right now, and also just requests from stores and restaurants and others to roll back some of the single-use policies. And I think that this allows us to step back and frame the issue instead of just responding to industry outrages or industry framing. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And of course, if we don't get to a question or you don't want to ask right now or think of something later, just please feel free to contact me. Here's my email. And I'm here in Nehalem, Oregon, and yeah, happy to talk more.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks, Megan. That was super. Thank you so much.
No, yeah.
If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and ask one. You can either type it in there, or if you would like, you can raise your hand and I can allow you to talk. I can unmute you. So let us know if you have any questions. We do partner with the Break Free from Plastic Project, and have been for maybe a couple of years. I know that the previous coordinator before me did a lot of that work with some schools, and we are still involved with that as well. And we partner with Surfrider as well. And on June 18th, a number of us North Coast partners are going to be screening the film virtually. So if you want to be involved in that, folks, then just send me an email. We're partnering with Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, Haystack Rock Awareness Program, Friends of Haystack Rock, and did I say Cape Falcon? Cape Falcon? Yes. And Surfrider, North Coast chapter. Yes. Okay, so we have a couple.
I should use this opportunity to say that while you saw some kind of previews, I would be doing a disservice to our very talented editors if I didn't mention that those are not clips from the film. Those were rough cut clips from our travels. And so you're in for a real treat if you haven't seen the film yet. But I just wanted to illustrate some of what we saw.
That's pretty cool. I did see the film, so I didn't see those clips yet. And just so you all know, the clips, the sound was awesome. The clips were a little like staggers of frame, but it's a beautiful, smooth movie. It's not like that with the frames. Okay, we have a couple of questions. I don't know if you can see them too, Megan, but I'll read them. Jill asks, you said the Bob's Red Mill was in a paper bale. How is that wrapper in a paper bale?
That's a great question. And yeah, I should have explained that a little bit better. So essentially what's happened, in a lot of US recycling programs is as more and more material has turned to plastic and our waste stream is made up of more and more plastic, we've had a real problem with contamination. So many US recycling programs are single stream, which means that they're collecting everything in one bin or roll cart and then sorting it on a line at a MRF before it's baled and then sold to market. Oftentimes, much of our infrastructure, recycling infrastructure, was made when paper was really the dominant material in the waste stream. And over time, we all know things have moved away. We're not consuming as much newsprint, and we all seem to have a lot more plastic packaging in our daily life and in our waste stream. So unfortunately, this is material that went through the line and either was not pulled out as recognized as plastic, or maybe because a lot of this stuff is flexible packaging, like the Bob's red packaging, it is actually read and scanned as paper because it's two-dimensional. And this is an oversimplification of our material recovery facility operations. So I apologize if anybody is cringing on the other side of the screen. But roughly, we have contamination. The wrong material is going in the wrong bale. So plastic is ending up in our bales of paper that are being sold for paper recycling. So in East Java, where we took that footage, they have a very big pulp industry. So they're buying lots of secondary paper, recycled paper. Unfortunately, that paper from the United States and other countries contains a lot of contamination, including plastic. So when the paper factory sorts through that material for their processes, they have a lot of plastic contamination, which is then dumped. So overall, this has been a major problem, and a lot of what we saw and heard in China and other importing countries is that, while we were exporting commodity goods, a lot of these bales really contained a lot of crap that people couldn't use or is really just garbage.
Mm-hmm. It's like those really early days of when you would have, when there really wasn't a lot of plastic, but you would have an envelope that had a plastic window, and you would be like, should I tear this out? And I'll put the plastic in my garbage. And it used to be simple, but then it stopped being so simple. Yeah. Kristen has a question. Would you be able to tell us where the recycled materials go to that are collected in Tillamook and Manzanita?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of transparency in these programs, but what I can tell you is that, as a resident of the North Coast and of Nehalem, you know, I'm a big fan of the work that Cardam did for years to really emphasize high quality separated materials. So I think we were really lucky here for a long time to have such an exceptional facility that really prioritized clean streams. And so what I mean by that is, you know, when we went there, we were actually source separating all of our materials and doing that work ourselves. So unfortunately, with all the complex types of packaging and materials in our waste stream now, humans are really the best sorters. So we were able to have very clean streams and have, you know, sorted down by plastic type, the different kinds of materials. Because of that high level of sorting and there's very clean streams, those materials were often sold at a higher price and had a better opportunity to be properly processed and sent to domestic markets if there were one, instead of in a mixed plastic bale. But I know that a lot of our material here does go to Far West Fibers in Portland. Traditionally, lots of the MRFs are operating in the Portland I-5 corridor area.
John asks, is there any potential for burning plastic in an environmentally responsible way in order to produce energy?
You know, John, I really wish there was. I wish there was a better story for that. Unfortunately, everything that we've seen in our research and our travels really shows that there's not a real clean way to burn plastic. There's just so many dioxins and dangerous toxic crap in plastics. You know, I have read and heard and seen firsthand a lot of facilities in Europe that are kind of touted as, you know, really high performing and contain scrubbers and are clean. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the incinerators that I saw in India and in China, those also came from those same European countries. The problem is, and we have a problem with this in the United States as well, is that those facilities only operate as well as they are regulated and monitored. And we have lots of problems with that even here in Oregon. We don't have adequate air monitoring and enforcement, and we have lots of crap in our air, and that's a global problem. And so we really don't want to contribute to that by burning more plastics.
Thanks, John. Melissa asks, can you mention that the triangle codes aren't all equal? In other words, some types were never really recyclable and they never will be.
This is great. These are such great questions and reminders. Yes, the recycling triangles are a total pain in the neck. These are essentially the recycling arrows symbol was co-opted by industry in an effort to show that all of their plastic is recyclable, and to identify which types of plastic they are, they came up with these resin codes that were, the idea here is that by putting a number on the bottom of each product, recyclers would more easily be able to separate the different resins into different types. Unfortunately, we know that that's not true, and also that not all of these plastics, as you say, are recyclable, or there's maybe not even a market for many of these plastics, even if they are recyclable.
Mm-hmm.
A really great resource that explains it a lot clearer than I just have. If you go to Frontline, there's a new PBS Frontline documentary, and it's all about kind of how the plastics industry has used recycling as a cover, really just to produce more plastics.
Mm-hmm.
And they really focus in on the Oregon story and have some great interviews from Oregon DEQ and some local processors and MRFs. So I highly recommend that. But yes, please don't be fooled by the recycling arrows. It really doesn't mean much to us anymore these days.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No questions at the moment. I was curious about if you yourself support cleanups and other types. Do you think that other types of surveys, like with NOAA, and we also have the Coastal Observation and Seabird Survey Team. A number of our volunteers work to survey birds, and Coast itself, they set up then a marine debris survey as well. And even though it seems insurmountable, seems like the small things we can do can still help, and that also some of these data collections, that the one that you were talking about, which is fantastic. I love audit surveys, and those happen in smaller communities too, and can make great education projects for teachers and things for their kids to learn about. But as I was saying, like, it's important to go to the top, and that needs to stop. The tap needs to be turned off. But here at the bottom, I know some people that feel helpless, and all they can do is walk and pick up trash, and it makes you feel better. And that's good, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I absolutely support community cleanups and individual action. And I don't mean to suggest otherwise by really emphasizing the need for collective and systemic change. I support beach cleanups, and I do, while I don't think that we're going to solve the problem alone by cleaning up the beaches, I do think it's important to clean our beaches. And I also think that it's a really good way, it's a good educational tool. It's a really good way to learn about how pervasive the problem is. And if we were able to stop production or slow down the flow of materials into the ocean, beach cleanups would be really effective. I mean, these gyres are rotating and kind of spitting out these materials every several years. And, really beach cleanup is ocean cleanup, because these oceans are able to expend and come out onto the shores. And if we are able to pick it up and quit putting it in there to begin with, it is effective in cleaning. Yeah. It's not going to solve the problem alone, but it's important to do. And further than that, further than solving the problem, there are impacts to our local shorelines and our local wildlife.
Exactly. I knew you would say yes. I just wanted everybody else to to hear you say yes too, because it is. I mean, you can't help but sometimes see the just how huge the problem is and not feel like so small. But we all know that even picking up a handful of trash could help save some little plover on the beach. I mean, it's amazing how much a little can do. But it's also important to know how big the problem is. Okay, so we've got, let's see, Dennis raised his hand. I'm going to allow Dennis to talk. I haven't done this yet, Dennis. It's the first time. I'm going into a new territory, so let's see how this goes. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, Dennis, you should be on with us. You might have to unmute yourself. Oh.
Yeah, I did, and that popped up as a window. So can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Megan. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation. I'm a neighbor of yours down in Depot Bay, so I think that's a neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
My question is, strategically, what are the most impactful things that you can do? I'm thinking of either globally or even locally, and what occurs to me is that some local governments or even state governments in some cases have placed restrictions on what you can sell, the bags that you can use, the straws that you can use, things of that sort. So that's one level of sort of governmental pressure, and then I'm not sure how to get the governments to actually do stuff like that. And then I like your idea of corporate shaming. And is that effective, and how do we make it more effective, and how does that come to light so that those corporations will respond?
Yeah, these are great questions, and some I think a lot about. I think the first part, there are ways to improve the system, and I know I have come out very strongly about some of the limitations and problems that we need to reconcile with our recycling system. And I have pointed out that recycling alone is not going to solve this problem. But I do think that there are ways that we can improve our waste management systems. We do need to focus on production and focus on the fact that oil and gas companies are prioritizing plastic and plastic packaging in particular as a long-term growth opportunity. There are billions of dollars in subsidies that allow these businesses, these massive oil and gas majors, to mass produce all this plastic packaging and sell it to communities that don't necessarily have the infrastructure to manage it. And I would argue that we don't have the infrastructure to manage it. You know, our best case scenario for a lot of this stuff is throwing it in the landfill. Unfortunately, lots of it doesn't go to the landfill. It ends up, as you saw, in bales that get dumped in other communities. So I think we need to be realistic about what it is we're trying to achieve with these programs. And, you know, I think for a long time we've been focused on diversion, get as many out of our own community, as much out of our own community as possible. And I think we really need to think about the impacts there. I think we need to call out which materials don't have markets, or which materials are causing problems for our processors, and either eliminate them or have the producers participate in some kind of extended producer responsibility or system that they pay into to help manage the costs, the extra costs that comes with processing these problematic materials. So I think there's lots of ways that we can tweak the existing system, but it has to come with a nod and a real understanding that the responsibility falls on the producers to help manage and to take responsibility for the cost of these. They also need to be designing with an eye toward end of life and how they can reuse or take back these materials. You know, there's a lot of talk about recyclability. Something is recyclable. That doesn't mean that it will be recycled. You know, a lot of this comes down to economics and to markets. And right now we're experiencing some of the lowest oil prices ever. And of course, this is impacting the cost of and price of virgin plastic. Virgin plastic is always very, very low. Now it's dirt cheap, and you're not going to find any markets for recycling or using recycled content. We need to call for mandatory recycled content levels. We need to talk about extended producer responsibility and eliminate problematic materials. Dennis, I could go on and on about this. Obviously, I've probably lost half the audience already.
They're all still here.
I'm happy to brainstorm more with you. If you want to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to share lots of information and thoughts around. We are seeing, the good news is we are seeing some really comprehensive policy that's starting to roll out. The Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act was just introduced in March. And while it is a national policy that has no likelihood of passing, I think it really does a good job of being comprehensive and looking upstream and showing what a model policy could look like, and hopefully inspiring some more local and regional action. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. So interesting, so awesome. Okay, we're gonna take 2 more questions because we love to keep these to an hour. Everybody keeps coming back. We've always got this nice little fat hour that we do with these wonderful presenters on their weeknights. So we'll do 2 more. We have one from Kristen. She says, great discussion and video. Can you please tell us about your educational background and what led you to get involved in these issues?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So I actually studied urban planning and community development in school. My background is in public policy. I first got into plastic pollution issues actually working in local politics, working for the mayor of Portland. And we partnered with Surfrider and developing a plastic bag policy, a plastic bag ban. And, you know, I think for me, really, I think that introduction was really an introduction to just, you know, I was interested in broad environmental and sustainability policy, but garbage for some reason and waste is a really tangible thing that, you know, I think politicians and elected officials, but also the general public, they're really drawn to. It's something we all experience, we all come into contact with. It's a really tangible and measurable way to think about our own impact. And so it became kind of a interesting vehicle for my work. And I went on to work at the City of Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and work on more waste management, recycling and composting programs broadly. And in recent years have worked as a consultant on a number of national and global plastic pollution campaigns and waste management programs. So it's just, how do we get into anything? It's been kind of an unexpected wild ride, but I talk to a lot of young people, and one of the things that I reflect on a lot is that, I think there's a lot of pressure sometimes to find what we're really passionate and interested in. And I think for me, I've learned that what are we not passionate and interested in? There's so many interesting and inspiring people doing great work. And I've always just been drawn to people. And, I think that's how I got involved with a lot of the local efforts here, and with Jesse is just, we have a lot in common, and we can't stop talking, obviously. But no, it's what else are we going to do but get involved and do what we can to help make it all a better place and make life more enjoyable. That's what it's about.
Great answer. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Kristen. Okay, last question. And then after this, I'm going to stay around for a few minutes. If anybody has any questions or wants to chat, we can talk. Kathy asks, we have to get a medication from Texas that needs to stay cool. It arrived in an Omaha steak box styrofoam with 6 to 8 ice packs in plastic. I called the pharmacy and they couldn't take the box back. We will get this every 6 weeks. What can we do? Thanks, Kathy.
Well, I hope this is my friend Kathy Tronque. And if it is, know that I'm going to give an incomplete answer now, and we should chat, because I think I admire your efforts to want to recycle styrofoam. I know it's hard. There have been some local drop-offs in the past, and I know a lot of those markets have really disappeared. Styrofoam is a really low-value plastic, and it's hard to process. It's lightweight and it crumbles, so it needs to be packed down, and we have to collect a lot of it for it to have any value. That being said, I don't want you to have to deal with a material that you have to have that's causing you grief about throwing away. I know that feeling. So let's brainstorm and let's see if we can find a place. The other thing I will say, and this isn't always what people want to hear, but throwing something in the garbage isn't the worst thing you can do anymore. I know that we've all been well trained to think that, we should recycle. And the reality is, if we don't know that this material is in the right bin or going to the right market, then we might be doing more harm than just by putting it in a landfill in our own community. As we've seen, a lot of this material gets exported and ends up somewhere else, and so often ends up in nearby waterways or in people's farms and fields and in their backyards. So I'd really encourage us to kind of try, I know it's hard, but try to break the impulse to recycle at all costs. Obviously, if there's a good market or a good option for you, pursue that. But if not, I think we just have to do the hard work and throw it in the trash and let it go to the landfill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes I think that's a good answer, and it's a hard one, but it's also one that makes people think then about their immediate environment and how much trash our own landfill can take, causing us maybe to buy less. And so hopefully that kind of thing can happen. So if anybody has any more questions, contact Megan. And thank you, Megan, for spending this time with us.
Oh, my pleasure. What a great engaged group. I'm super happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. All right. So here is Megan's information. Megan at peakplasticfoundation.org. And you can see all about Peak Plastic Foundation, what it is, at peakplasticfoundation.org. Again, my name is Jessie Jones, and I'm the volunteer coordinator for Coast Watch. You can contact me, Jessie, Jesse, at OregonShores.org. And again, you can get more information about Coast Watch and Oregon Shores at OregonShores.org. And if you haven't seen the story of plastic yet, here is where you can find where you can watch it. There are many ways to watch it. I think there are some ways to watch it for free. I think there are some ways to watch it for very, very inexpensive. So check it out, storyofplastic.org/watch. Thanks again. Take care.